What if the way you teach and care for young children could change the world? Welcome to Reimagine Childhood, brought to you by the Early Childhood Christian Network, helping you grow as an educator, leader, and follower of Jesus. Early childhood is a sacred season where hearts are shaped, faith begins to grow, and lifelong learning takes root. We believe teaching young children is more than a job, it's a calling. That's why each episode is filled with practical strategies, real stories, and faith-based encouragement to help you create joyful, meaningful learning experiences in your classroom and beyond. Let's reimagine what's possible in early childhood together. I'm your host, Monica Healer, and I'm so glad you're here. I'm looking forward to introducing you to a new guest today, Devon Kuntzman, a toddler expert. She's a professional certified coach with a degree in psychology. She has years of experience as a professional nanny for high-profile families across the globe. She has a toddler of her own now, and she's the founder of Transforming Toddlerhood and released a book last year called, you guessed it, Transforming Toddlerhood. She also hosts the annual Transforming Toddlerhood Summit, and she runs an Instagram account with almost 1 million followers. Y'all, she knows her stuff. We're linking to all her resources in the show notes, so be sure to check them out. We're talking today about some of the most challenging behaviors we see in toddlers. Are you ready to put some new tools in your tool belt? Let's go.
Changing stuff.
Devon, welcome to the podcast today. I'm so glad to have you.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Devon, as a toddler parenting expert, first off, kudos for that. Girl, nobody that I know wants to be a toddler expert, but I always love finding people who love toddlers because I think so often we hear this like the terrible twos or the terrible toddler years. And I know based on what I've seen from you, your content online, your website, even your book, you want to drop that terrible off of the toddler label. So I want to start out with this. First off, why do you love toddlers so much? And what's the difference? Like, what's distinct between infants, toddlers, and preschoolers? Toddlers is this unique stage right there in the middle. So talk a little bit about that.
Yes, absolutely. So you are so right. If we only listen to society and all the labels that they give, terrible twos and three-nager and fierce fours and all the things, or fearsome fours, I've seen so many. If we just listen to that, then we are going to be terrified of this developmental period. And back in 2018, when I started Transforming Toddlerhood, I had just come through a big transformation myself in terms of how I viewed young children and toddlers. I was a nanny for families all over the world, and I took care of a lot of different toddlers and with a lot of different needs, a lot of different dynamics. And then I realized that this is one of the most challenging, most critical developmental periods, both challenging and critical, and no one was talking about it online. So that's when I said, this has to change because if we only look at toddlerhood as terrible, we are doing ourselves a disservice and enjoying one of these most precious developmental periods, but we're doing our child disservice because this is a critical developmental period for them, for their brain maturation and architecture. And so, what I love most about toddlers, and don't get me wrong, there's lots of challenges, but they are becoming their own person for the first time,
Yes.
which is what drives a lot of the challenging behavior, but also makes it so beautiful and precious. And they are doing so many things for the first time. You're discovering their unique personality, and they love unconditionally no matter what, and they live in the present moment. And I honestly feel that when we can get past these negative labels and the stories we're telling ourselves about the behavior that keeps us stuck, there's a lot of beauty inside of this developmental stage.
Absolutely. I love being in a room full of 2-year-olds, which is, it's hard, physically really hard. I mean, they have tons of energy, they have lots of questions, they have no impulse control. There's a lot. So, yeah, there's something challenging, but when you watch a 2-year-old discover that they can actually master something for the first time, or that they just discover something for the first time. That first time they stop as they're walking down the sidewalk to notice a bug or a flower or any of that. There is nothing quite like that moment with
This
those
joy,
youngsters.
this joy in the moment is just
Yeah.
so beautiful, and we have so much to learn from them. And I also want to answer your part of the question about the
Yeah.
difference between like baby, toddler, and preschooler. And the way
Yeah.
that I break it down in my book, Transforming Toddlerhood, because this is a question I get a lot. And
Mhm.
it really also ties into the behavior that we see during this time.
Yeah.
So, a baby oftentimes relates to themselves as an extension of us because they are
Okay.
100% reliant on us in every way to meet all of their needs. And we often will kind of relate to our baby as an extension of us too, right?
Right.
That's part of the
Right.
bond that keeps the baby alive. And the way that the babies communicate with us, of course, is like smiling and things like that. But when something's wrong or not going well, it's through crying. Then all of a sudden, between 9 and 15 months, your baby starts to morph into a toddler. And we start
Mhm.
seeing that they have their own preferences for the very first time. And they start saying no and all these things because your child is actually trying to become an individual and really create a sense of self for the very first time because they're discovering that they're not an extension of you, that they are their very own person. So the behaviors that drive us just totally nuts in this developmental period are
Mhm.
developmentally appropriate as they try to separate from us for the very first time. So what
Mhm.
I typically say is that 1 and 2 year olds are young toddlers. 3 and 4 year olds are older toddlers. Now, oftentimes we'll say 3 and 4 year olds are preschoolers, but that's more from like a school perspective of like, this
Right.
is your preschool, the time before actual school
Sure.
time. But developmentally, 3 and 4 year olds are still toddlers. And then I say age 5 is starting to shift out of toddlerhood into the school age years. But the big difference between the young toddlers and the older toddlers is their language abilities and their ability to express themselves with words. 1 and 2 year olds have that is very limited for them. So they're going to communicate because all behavior is communication. They're going to communicate through crying, hitting, kicking, throwing, biting, all the things. But then the older toddlers, the 3 and 4 year olds, are going to communicate more so with their words and less with all of those big physical behaviors. I mean, the physical behaviors will still be there, but then
Right.
you're going to start getting things like, you're not my best friend anymore. You're mean. I don't like you. You're not coming with me. All the
Yeah.
things
You're
that
not invited
toddlers.
to my birthday party.
Exactly, because they're trying to express these feelings and emotions that they have on the inside in the best way they know how, and in the best way they know that will get to the end result that they're looking for. So they are using these words that we oftentimes judge as rude, but really they don't have the skills. All of the behaviors that we're seeing that's developmentally appropriate is just a lack of skills. It's communication and a lack of skills.
I love that you actually have this three-part framework that you use when you're thinking about challenging behaviors in these young and older toddlers. I actually love that distinction too of young toddlers and older toddlers. I had not considered that, but I love thinking of children that way. But your three-part framework is this: decode the behavior. So try to figure out what's actually going on because behavior is always more than just the actual action. Nurture development in children, and then build the skills that they might be missing. And so
Mhm.
we are going to talk through what you have designated as your top four challenging behaviors for toddlers. Now, a lot of these behaviors, I will say, they are more challenging in young toddlers because older toddlers are starting to move into being able to express with language. So a lot of these behaviors are going to apply to the younger toddlers primarily. First one, power struggles. It's what you said. These babies are now trying to separate themselves into unique individuals, separate from their mama, their daddy, their caregivers, and become somebody totally separate, which means mine, no, and those sorts of behaviors. So, talk a little bit about that. What do
Yes,
we
or
do?
looking you in the eye and doing the thing that you just told them not to do,
Yep,
or asking
exactly
them to do
that.
something and they run the opposite direction. All of those behaviors that, when we don't understand what's happening, can really, really make our blood boil. So, in these moments, what is happening is that your toddler is discovering that they're their own individual. So, they are experimenting and exploring with what they're capable of and how the environment reacts to them. And the environment includes all of us adults.
Yep.
So they are experimenting and exploring with that. So that's where we're going to see them saying no and all of these things. But then we as the adults, we start getting frustrated because we're trying to be in control. We think, and oftentimes society also tells us we have to be in control of kids, right? And if you're not, you're like a bad parent or something. But the thing is that you can't actually control another human being. You
Exactly.
can be in charge and you can use connection to create influence, which can create cooperation, but you can't actually control someone else. And wow, 2-year-olds really love to show us that, right? They love to show us that. So, what I always tell parents and caregivers when it comes to power struggles is that it takes two people to be in a power struggle. So, think about that for a second. And if we have a child with an immature brain that's lacking impulse control and regulation skills that is developmentally driven to experiment and explore and exert their will,
Yeah.
if we are waiting on them to leave the power struggle, we are going to be there
A
forever.
long time.
Oh my goodness. So we're the ones who have to say, oh, wait, I see we're in a power struggle. I need to exit this. But by exiting, I don't mean exiting in a disempowered way where we're giving up and giving in, because when we do that, we are reinforcing the behavior. Now, I'm also not saying you need to be a perfect parent or caregiver, because there's going to be times where we are under resourced, where we're exhausted, we're tired, we just can't do any more in that moment, where we might just backpedal and be like, okay, fine. But here at Transforming Toddlerhood, what we always talk about is consistency, which isn't perfect. It means more often than not, it's predictable you're going to respond a certain way. So, more often than not, and for every child, that level of predictability is going to, change for that unique child and also depending on their age. But where you're going to have to say, whoa, I see I'm trying to win here. I'm trying to control. We're all getting frustrated. I got to get out of this. So then you're going to think about, okay, what am I going to do to get out of this? And this is where in my community, the Little Listeners Toolbox, where we talk about all the different tools that you can use to exit it, which might look like giving a child a choice between your boundaries, right? And so it
Yeah.
might be, giving them a choice between doing this or doing that, or this thing or that thing. It's within your boundaries. It might be looking at how to meet your child's need within your boundaries. So, say this is an example I often use. You have a child like that's wants to play in the dog's water dish because water's fun when you're
Of
a
course it
little
is.
one, right? But that is not appropriate. And so when a child is saying, okay, I want to do water play, I want to experiment and explore with this medium, then what we say is, oh, okay, how do I meet that need within the boundary? So let's go take a bath. Let's go wash these dishes in the sink. Let's go outside and play in a bucket of water, whatever it might be. So, and then another way that you can get out of a power struggle might be when and then. When you brush your teeth, then we will read books. But the key is you don't stand there. You don't stand there and wait for them to do the thing. You have to move forward. The longer you stand there and wait for your child to make the first move, you're going to be spending a lot of time and your frustration is going to rise. So you've got to move on. You've got to like go to the other room, start picking out a book. They might follow you the first couple of times. You say, oh, I see you really want to read a book. When you brush your teeth, then you can read a book. Let's go in the bathroom. You pick them up or take their hand, guide them back to the bathroom. Let's brush your teeth. If they still refuse, you say it again. The more often you hold the limit and follow through, your child will realize, oh, this is a pattern. It's not going to change. This is serious. And then they'll start following through and there'll be less and less pushback when the predictability is there. And we're not trying to win.
I think that's so, so important that as a parent or a caregiver, a teacher in a classroom, we are the ones that have to step out of that power struggle, but that doesn't mean we give in. I love that you said
Exactly.
that. Hold the limit. Your boundary is important. And that's where we're trying to build predictability, that the limit is predictable and we will be consistent more often than not. Again, not perfect. None of us are perfect. But more often than not, we're going to hold the limit so that that child starts recognizing this is actually the predictable pattern. The more
Mhm.
often that we give in, don't hold the boundary, just let them, the less likely we're ever going to hit where they're building the skills that they need, right? Like it is important. Exactly what you said in your example. Brush your teeth, then we can read a book. You can't just not brush your teeth. That's not an option. You must brush your teeth. But we don't have to make this into a I'm commanding you to brush your teeth. It's really a this is just how it is. Matter of fact, step out of the struggle and be a good parent or a
Well,
great
because
caregiver.
yes, because the more attached we appear to an outcome,
Mm,
toddlers sense that and it triggers that developmental drive again to exert their will, not because they're trying to be a
oh,
menace, not because they're trying to be bad, but because they are developmentally driven to become their own person. That is not their fault. They are not trying to make our lives miserable. They can't help it. That is the
yeah,
developmental drive that they are up against, that they have to wade through to try to follow through on the things that
yeah.
we're saying. It's very, very difficult for them, especially if they're getting tired, if they're getting hungry, if there's been some type of big life change, if there's some type of upset
Mm,
that's hanging over their heads, something like this. So we just have to realize that oftentimes it's not that the child's unwilling to listen to us. It's that they can't in that moment. So it's up to us to use those developmentally smart tools, those
right.
tools that work with their development, not against it, to again create that positive momentum forward.
So good. Okay, Devin, let's move on to the next challenging behavior. Physical aggression, hitting, kicking, grabbing. A lot of that starts happening right about 18 months, 2 years, 2.5 years. Sometimes it goes a little bit later than that, but talk to us about how we can manage that. This is especially, I think, can become kind of a challenge in an early childhood classroom, or say if you have to drop your child off at childcare so you can go to work. These, I think, in a group setting, this kind of aggressive behavior can become really challenging really quickly. So let's talk through some really easy strategies that parents and caregivers can use to handle that.
Yes, absolutely. This is definitely a very, very big challenge. And, it's top of mind because no parent wants to have like the kid that hits, bites, or pushes. And it's really challenging for teachers and caregivers to also deal with, especially in a group setting. And I think the most important thing to know, the reason that these behaviors happen is because kids are trying to communicate. They're trying to communicate their feelings, emotions, maybe their sensory needs, their basic needs, that they're tired or hungry, their developmental needs, some of those that we've talked about, like the need for control or to exert their will, to experiment and explore. And I see this happening the most when it comes to disagreements on sharing and toys and things like that, because toddlerhood is just such an ego-centric developmental period, and there's just not the impulse control there. So, what we want to make sure is that we are going through the process of connecting, setting
Yeah.
the limit, and then teaching the skill. And sometimes we have to set that limit right away to create the physical safety, where you might have to get in between two kids and say something like, "Oh, I won't let you hit William." And then you
Hmm.
get in between them. "I know you're feeling upset right now. I know you really want those blocks. I won't let you hit." So now we're doing a little bit of connection and
Yeah.
still saying, "I won't let you hit." Hitting hurts. And oftentimes, what we need to do then is just keep them separated while grounding ourselves and staying calm, not
Yes.
letting ourselves get escalated, and, work on that, see what's happening. And once the child is calm again, because depending on the child, their personality, they might like launch into like a meltdown. Now they're on the floor having a tantrum. They didn't like being told no. They can't have control over what they want to do, all the things, or they're feeling embarrassed that they hit, because kids don't want to hit other kids. Again, it's that lack of impulse control and not having a better way to communicate at that age. Whatever the reason is, and now they're in the tantrum on the floor, we've got to let them have that emotional poop while keeping them safe physically and emotionally, keeping ourselves
Mm,
safe physically and
yeah.
emotionally. And when they get to the other side, that's when we start teaching the skills. What can we do next time? What can we do next time that when you want the toy and you feel like hitting? Now, if you have a young toddler, they might not be able to answer that question, but receptive language develops before expressive language. So even at
Mm,
15 months, kids can understand so much of what we're saying. And then we might have to say, "Oh, next time you can wait," or you can say, "Help, please," or, something simple
yeah.
that we're want to teach them. But we've got to start teaching them the skills of what to do instead. And sometimes kids will bite also to like protect their friends even, if like one kid steals takes a toy from another kid, the third kid might come up and just bite the kid that took the toy because they were trying to like self-correct that child. There's
Yeah.
just so many reasons these behaviors happen, but it's not because the kid is inherently bad.
I think that's a great reminder. I think a lot of times as the adult, it's super important because I think when you see one child hurt another child in this aggressive behavior, I think as adults, like our primary tendency is then to jump in as fast as possible. Our heart rate's elevated, our face might be turning pink, like all those, right? That shows we're elevated. And all that does in that situation is also elevate those children, both the child who's been hurt and the child who's doing the hurting. So, really important reminder that as the adult, we ground ourselves and yes, step in between. I'm not going to let you hit. I'm not going to let you kick or bite or grab or all those things. So important as the adult that we can remain calm. And I love the reminder that you said we can't teach the skill in the moment that child is freaking out over there.
No.
Like you've got to wait till that child is calmed down and then start teaching what to do. And
Mhm.
that, I mean, that's anybody that listens to this podcast has heard me say that many times that I'm a big proponent of instead of just saying no or stop, what is it that you actually want them to do? And a lot of times it's easier for us to say stop hitting, but we don't give them tools for something to do instead. And so I
That's the
think
thing.
that's
This is a
really
lack of
important.
skills. Yeah. So they need to know what to do instead. And so
Yeah.
a great way in the classroom to work on the skills gap, because again, this is not a bad kid. This is a skills gap. It's
Right.
communication skills, what to do in the moment skills. So when you have kids gathered for a story or eating a snack, that's the moment you can read books about big emotions. You can read books about hitting and biting in the classroom when you got the kids gathered in different areas. You can do like some role play with like two little animals or two little dolls that shows the language to use to work out these different situations. And for the younger a child is, the less impulse control they have. So the longer it's going to take them to learn this skill. But if we're not teaching them the skills, it's going to take them even longer. When we're teaching the skills, one day it's just going to start clicking for them
Yeah.
and you're going to be surprised. But we've got to put in the time to teach the skills. But it's so hard because I hate to say it, and this is the hardest part of my job, telling people that you're not going to see like that instant gratification, which is so hard for us in today's world where everything is instant gratification because we
Yeah.
have our phones that are little computers. We have streaming entire series at once, and Amazon shows up on your doorstep.
Yeah.
But when it comes to working with young children, we're just not going to see that instant gratification. We've got to teach the skill and support them in learning it, and it will fall in place. We've got to be patient.
Such a great reminder. It definitely will happen as long as we're consistent. Again, hold the limit, teach the skill, and not just stop the behavior. I think that's super important. I want to talk a little bit more about biting because I feel like biting is one of those behaviors that feels more personal even than hitting. And it's one of the things that I feel like most of us as adults, we just don't know what to do with it. Like it feels so aggressive that a lot of us get in our own way of actually handling behavior. So, talk a little bit more specifically about biting. What do we do when a child, but I think none of us as a parent, none of us wants to have the kid that's known as the biter. And we also don't want to be that parent that picks up at childcare every day and every day your child's been bitten. So, what do we do in the classroom? What do we do as parents and caregivers? How can we help our young children and also ourselves?
Yes, biting feels harder, I think, because biting almost has the potential to somehow do the most amount of physical damage, right? Because there might
Mhm,
be marks
mhm.
that are left. There might actually like break through the skin. And I think that's
Yeah.
why biting feels so much more alarming than everything else. So,
Mhm.
what we need to remember is that kids will oftentimes have like a primary way that they choose to express themselves when they are overwhelmed and overstimulated. And for some, it might be hitting, for some, it might be biting, for others, it might be kicking or pushing. Every child's going to be different. So if a child is in the pattern of biting, it doesn't mean they're like a bad kid or worse than other kids. It just means that is the way that has felt good for them to try to release that inner tension and to try to communicate their needs in that moment. So, what we want to do is there's something for the child who's being bitten and something for the child who's doing the biting. So, first of all, when that happens, we have to create that physical safety as soon as possible. And then what we want to do is with the child who got hurt, we want to check in on them. For
Yeah.
the child that is doing the biting, we also want to check in on them because they're not biting for no reason. They're
Right.
biting because something happened. And if we label the child who did the biting as the aggressor and the child who didn't get bitten as the victim, we're actually reinforcing
Right.
the behavior because it becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy and kids start to identify with these labels that we're putting on them. So it's so important that we check in on both kids because there's both kids are having something happening to them in that moment.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then we still want to of course connect, and if we have an idea of what was happening there, we might say something like, oh, you were so upset that he was sitting here and you wanted to sit in this chair that you bit him, whatever it might be. But if you don't know what it is, you might say something like, oh, I wonder what happened here. I wonder what had you so upset that made you want to bite. Now,
Yeah.
if again, a young toddler might not be able to answer you, but a 3 and 4 year old will be able to. And so, you want to come in with curiosity instead of being the judge and jury because you're going to get a lot further in transforming the behavior. And then, of course, you want to continue setting the limit. It's not okay to bite. Biting hurts. It's unsafe. I have to keep everyone safe here. And then when they're calm, teaching the skill of what to do instead. That's why it's so important to get curious of, why is this happening? And if you don't know why it's happening, I really advise you to track the behavior. Just write down the day, the time, what was happening right before, the action that happened, and then how you responded and how the child responded. You're going to start
Mm.
seeing patterns, and then that pattern will help you also know what to do. But what about the kid that got bitten? We have to empower kids to start to have a voice. When they're younger, the
Mm.
younger they are, we have to be their voice, but then we can also, so we have to model the behavior, but we can also teach them. So you might say to the child that got bitten, oh, I'm sorry you got bitten. Are you okay? I know that was scary. I'm here to help. Next time, if someone's coming at you or someone bites you, you can say no. You can say stop. I don't like that. You teach them
Yeah.
something short and small with emotion. Now, I'm not saying for everyone who's listening, I'm like putting up my hand like a stop sign. And I'm not
Yes.
saying to like bop anyone, but it's more so just putting
Right.
up the hand to say stop. And young kids pick this up really quickly. And then the child who's getting bitten is starting to feel empowered and like they
Yeah.
have a sense of control of what to do. And so this is kind of a long answer because there's a lot of like things in play, but we want
Mhm.
to make sure that we're teaching skills in the end, teaching skills to both children.
I think that's so, so important. I know way back when I was in a classroom, I often would have, especially some of my more timid children who struggle with standing up for themselves. Like we would
Yes.
practice in front of a mirror and I would practice
Yes.
like say it loudly, say it strong, say it in your strong voice. Stop. I don't like that. Or no, don't do that. But I think it's important for us to teach skills to both children, the
Mhm.
one who's being bitten and then the one who's biting. I think maybe I learned this from you or maybe from someone on your summit that sometimes biting is actually like jaw development, that
Mhm.
there is a delay in jaw development and they're really trying to meet that need of deep pressure in these different joints. And so just one of those few things, like there's lots of reasons children might bite, y'all, lots of reasons. But I thought that was fascinating.
Yes.
So
It can be sensory, it can be physical, it can be
yeah.
emotional, it can be, so many things. A lot of times it's coming or just straight up frustration from
Yeah.
not being able to have the words, especially kids that have a speech delay or a language delay. They're going to have a lot more biting and a lot more hitting because have way more frustration because they're
Mhm.
unable to communicate as well as their peers. And so you're going to see an increase. There's so many different reasons biting can happen. It's absolutely true.
This is where what you said earlier, like get curious is
Yeah.
so important. And biting, I feel like is one of those behaviors, especially with younger toddlers, where you really have to be curious, pay attention, track the pattern of what's happening so that you can figure out that underlying need that needs to be met so that you can help those children really learn more appropriate ways to express themselves.
Yes, and in the beginning, you might need a bridge to that skill, right? So it's going to take time to teach a toddler who's really stuck in this pattern and this habit to,
Yeah.
respond more appropriately. So there might need to be a bridge in the middle of that, which might look like, some type of like sensory thing, like a silicone, little stick or something that a child can bite. So what we want to do is move the child. So we have to scaffold and build the skills. So first, we want to move the child from biting another person to biting something that's safe to bite. That might be the first step. And then once they're biting something safe to bite, then we can like help them move past biting as a form of communication. But sometimes we need to have several steps in that process. We can't just jump from where they're at to the exact outcome we want. That's also very important to remember because
Right.
oftentimes parents and caregivers get frustrated whenever they can't get to the outcome they want fast. And so sometimes kids need more stages in between and a lot of positive reinforcement. Oh, you were so upset you wanted to bite someone and you didn't bite, or you chose to bite your thing. This is, that it makes such a huge difference to break the skill down into tinier steps. Some kids do need that.
I so agree. Okay, last challenging behavior for toddlers, tantrums. I think this is for me one of the hardest things when I was a young mom that my
Mhm.
child just flat out throwing themselves on the floor and you feel like there is nothing I can do here. I just want this to stop. What do we do?
I'm a toddler mom too, and I get exhausted with tantrums. Just this past weekend, my toddler, Saturday morning, we're like, can we celebrate? It's Saturday morning. No,
Yes.
we can't. We are going to have a 45-minute tantrum because he couldn't go to his grandparents' house because his grandparents were coming to our house. And he didn't want that. He didn't let, once he realized that we weren't going to budge on that, now he wanted to watch a movie. And we're like, we don't watch movies on Saturday morning. He's like, what's happening here? And then he's like, but now he wants ice cream for breakfast. Like we've
Yeah.
never had ice cream for breakfast. So he was just so upset that he kept asking for things that he knew he wasn't going to get. And it
Mhm.
kept like fueling that upsetness. And it turned into a 45-minute meltdown situation. And it is tough. It is tough whenever you are faced with these big emotions because we've been programmed as adults that some emotions are good and some emotions are bad. So when we're faced with those quote unquote bad emotions, we're like, make it stop, keep it away. We haven't
Yeah.
increased our capacity to be with the full spectrum of emotions. So that's why tantrums can be so hard on us. But what we have to do is reframe this child isn't being bad. They're having a hard time. They're lacking the skills that they need. And
Mhm.
this is healthy. Crying is very healthy. It is their emotional poop. Kids have to let this out to get back to their emotional equilibrium.
Yeah.
We don't want them to hold that in. It's going to just get worse and worse and worse. So, what we want them to be able to let that go. At the same time, we've got to have some tools of like, okay, how are we going to get out of this? But I just want to say the goal isn't necessarily to stop the tantrum because we don't want to stop a kid from their emotions. They need to release those emotions. So, what are we going to
Right.
do? We're going to make sure the child's safe, that they're not going to like cut their head on a sharp edge or slam it on like the
Right.
tile floor or something like that. So if we need to like block their head because they're slamming their head around, or we need to put them on like a carpet or like a beanbag chair or something, we have to make
Yeah.
sure they're physically safe. Then we say to ourselves, everyone is safe. This is not an emergency. I am safe.
Mhm.
This child's safe. We are safe. You start de-escalating yourself because emotions are contagious. And the more frustrated and upset we are, the more frustrated and upset a child is going to get. And it's going to take longer
Absolutely.
for them to recover from that tantrum. Then we have to decide. First of all, we want to keep upholding the limits, right? If we set a limit that triggered this tantrum, we got to uphold the limit. We don't want to like backtrack on that. But then we've got to see, okay, is this a true tantrum that's like goal oriented and the child is like having a hard time with, accepting that this thing isn't going to happen? Or has it like spiraled into a full on meltdown where now they can't see and hear anything, that they are just
Mhm.
lost in the emotions and they are just like lost out at sea in like a raging storm, right?
Yeah.
Because If it's more of like a goal oriented, but it hasn't like completely divulged into a full on meltdown, then
Mm,
what we want to do is just uphold the limit and then we want to move forward, right?
yeah.
And so you go on to like the next task, and then you might come back and check on them. But when the child sees that you move forward, they're likely going to move forward. But if it has just totally gone down into like the biggest meltdown, they're not even like
Yes.
aware of their surroundings, their body, all the things, then we just need to be patient, wait it out, still go check on them. Of course, we can't like be with them 100% of the time, but know that the goal is to keep everyone safe, uphold the limit, and then let them support them with their emotions. And every child's going to be different, but honestly, if they're in the throes of a massive meltdown and they've just completely like left the room, the less is more in those moments. Less talking, less intervention, less physical touch, to try to like give them a hug or something. Less is usually more when they're at the crux of the tantrum or meltdown.
Yeah. I definitely think if they're floating out at sea and all their emotions, the last thing they need is for you to try to talk to them or
Yes.
add any sensory stimulation at that point can
Yes.
just push them further out rather than pulling them
Mm-hmm.
back in. So giving them a
Yeah.
second to, and again, y'all, I hope what you heard over and over is so much depends on us as the adult remaining calm, matter of fact, and able to control our own emotions so that we can support these children in what they're going through.
That's
So,
the real work. That's the challenging work. And that's why our motto at Transforming Toddlerhood is practice makes progress, not perfection, because we
oh,
are all human beings. You are a human as the adult, the child is a human. We are going to have the full spectrum of emotions and we're going to make mistakes. So
mm,
it's about how can we be with our humanness? How can we practice? Growth is not going to be linear, but every time we
right.
practice, we're going to make some type of progress.
Yeah, so good. I think I've heard you say each and every moment is an opportunity to practice again, but you have the choice to accept. And
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Every moment, y'all, every moment with our young toddlers, older toddlers, with our own selves, we get a chance to practice new skills, to practice something different. And so even if you messed up yesterday, if you messed up an hour ago, you're going to have another chance to try it again. And we get to do things better to help ourselves, to help the children in our care. I love that. Devon, this has been so fun.
Thank you. I've loved every minute of it.
Love hearing from experts in toddlerhood. And we will link to transformingtoddlerhood.com, your website. They can find you on social media using transformingtoddlerhood.com. We can find your book on Amazon. We'll link to all of those in the show notes, y'all. So take a look, go follow Devon. She is a huge resource. If you are working with or raising toddlers, you need to know Devon. Thanks for being with us, Devon. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Great.
What was your favorite part of this episode? I personally love how relatable Devon is and the fact that she has her own toddler right now after years of caring for other toddlers. And y'all, she doesn't act like she has all the answers. I mean, she told the story of her own toddler throwing a fit, but she knows the tools. And that's the reality. There are tools that we can use. One thing that stuck out to me, she talked multiple times about how, as the adult, we need to hold the line. Keep the boundary in place, even when the child is melting down, throwing a fit, or tantruming on the floor. Did you hear that? Sometimes it's so much easier to just give in and stop the craziness in the moment. But we're actually not teaching these youngsters anything when we do that. We're extending the crazy cycle. God has designed their little brains and bodies to develop just as they are. But they need us, the caring, nurturing adults in their lives, to stay calm and hold the line consistently. Remember, not perfectly, but consistently. Set an appropriate expectation that's age and developmentally appropriate, and then just hold it. This sounds so simple, and yet it's so hard in those everyday situations, isn't it? Take heart. God is equipping you in each moment to do better than you did last time. I loved a phrase that Devon shared near the end. Practice doesn't have to be perfect to lead to progress. You have multiple opportunities to keep practicing every day. Keep it up as you are planting seeds and watering them. God will bring the growth in these young children. Trust Him to do that as you do your best. Thanks for spending time with us today on Reimagine Childhood. We hope you walk away with a fresh idea, a little encouragement, and a big reminder that your work with young children truly changes lives. If this episode was helpful, would you take a moment to subscribe? Rate the show in whichever app you listen, and then share this episode with someone who might benefit. Your engagement helps us reach more teachers and caregivers who are shaping the next generation for Jesus. Stay connected with us on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube, and our website at early.com. Until next time, keep nurturing wonder, faith, and joy in the children God has placed in your care.